What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. And this time we're taking a look at Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, directed by Gil Keenan, co-written by Keenan and Jason Rittman. Frozen Empire is the fourth installment into the Ghostbusters franchise, the mainline franchise, and the sequel to Ghostbusters Afterlife. Alright, so, with all that being said, let's just go over this movie as quick as possible. So, overall, I actually really enjoyed Frozen Empire. I thought this movie was actually pretty good and a lot of fun. I like it on the same level as Afterlife. I thought Afterlife overall was a good Ghostbusters movie in the sense that it paid tribute to what came before it, and tried to tell its own story. Afterlife wasn't an all the way perfect movie. There are a lot of areas in that movie where it kind of drags on way too long, and it kind of takes forever to get going. But you get a sense that Afterlife was paying tribute to what came before it, and not taking a giant dump over what came over the legacy. It was trying to pay tribute to the Ghostbusters legacy, and not make it look like a farce or a joke. To me, Frozen Empire now, with Afterlife more or less regaining goodwill from the Ghostbusters fan base, you can now tell your own story with these characters that you established in that movie. And that's basically what Frozen Empire is. Frozen Empire is a movie that is focused on telling its own story and standing on its own 2 feet. And for that, I enjoyed it. I liked it. The whole thing about this, though, so the whole thing of Frozen Empire is that there is this new ghost whose name is Graka, who more or less can pretty much freeze you below sub-zero temperature and basically kill you by freezing you to death. Picture Mr. Freeze from Batman, only with supernatural powers, and he can literally freeze the entire world. That's pretty much what the character of Graka is. So the Ghostbusters have to try and find a way to defeat this icy being, while all the while the lore of Ghostbusters in general gets more expanded upon. And I'm really of two opinions on the expansion of the Ghostbusters lore. In one instance, I appreciate that they're trying to do that, they're doing some different things with it. On the other hand, I don't know. It is kind of weird because they kind of go in the way of Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I'm not really a fan of the show of the show. I know just the basics of it just by watching reviews and my friends tell me about it. So I get I have a general understanding of what that show is all about. So an example is that the character of Kumail Nanjiani, who plays the character of Nadim, he gives Ray an orb, and it's revealed that this orb is pretty much imprisoning this being known as Graka, who has the power to pretty much freeze you to death. And as the movie goes on, we come to the understanding that Nadim is what's known as a fire master, which are a group of people who are capable of defeating Graka and keeping him in his imprisonment. So it's like Avatar: The Last Airbender. He's a fire master, so he basically can bend fire, I guess. Again, it's very Avatarish, very last Airbendery. I kind of like the Ghostbusters where it's just them battling ghosts, and you don't have all this other just nonsense that kind of convolutes it and kind of just takes the fun out of it, to me at least. No disrespect to Kumail Nanjiani. I thought he was actually pretty funny in the movie, and I think the scenes with him and Dan Aykroyd are absolutely hilarious. I think they have really good bantering, but I'm just not an overall fan of expanding the lore in that sort of way, where now you're bringing in like super powered beings, which is, I don't know. For Ghostbusters, to me, it feels very off. It feels off. Don't feel like a natural progression. Like, that's my biggest complaint. It's not the character, it's the direction they took the character in. And another thing is that Graka, as just an overall being, he's not as interesting as Gozer, nor as interesting as Vigo. So he's pretty much just there. Like, Graka comes across more as like a villain of the week than a villain with charisma, because he doesn't have any. At least Gozer had a type of goal that they were fighting for. Vigo had a goal that he was fighting for. Graka's goal, to me, Graka's just wants to freeze things and kill things. Like, he doesn't come across. He comes across more as a force than an actual being. And I don't know. It can kind of come across as just generic and boring. And when you have a weak villain like that, what surrounds it needs to be somewhat captivating or at least mildly interesting. And that to me is where the movie kind of has more of a stronger points. Like the stuff with the overall villain, that's the movie's weakest point. But the stuff that I actually do like are the family dynamics. So, so more or less the original cast from the Afterlife returns: Paul Rudd, Finn Wolfhard, Carrie Coon, the actress who played Phoebe, and their two friends Lucky and Podcast. They also return for this movie. And of course, the original cast, Ernie Hudson, Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, they also come back, with Dan Aykroyd more or less acting like a mentor to Phoebe and Podcast, and them having their own little fun adventure. Bill Murray, who's not in the movie a whole lot, does have some fun scenes. I actually do like the scene where he's trying to test Nadeem by trying to build his anger out, so that way he can see how is able to control his power. That scene's pretty funny. And I do like the overall idea of Zedmore more or less being the public face of the Ghostbusters and being his financial benefactor. I thought all that stuff was really, really good. I like all that stuff, and I like the expansion of that with the Ghostbusters, not the supernatural side, but more the science side, and more as growing the Ghostbusters more as a team, as a governing body, as a governing body. So basically, the firehouse is being condemned. Excuse me. The firehouse traps are pretty much becoming overstuffed. So Winston takes the family to his new headquarters, where he basically has his own team of paranormal researchers. And based off Egon's plans for the first Ghostbuster containment unit, they have a massive amount of containment units. Expanding the lore in that instance, that's a good idea. I like that idea, and I want to see it be more expanded upon if we ever get more movies set in this continuity, and the original continuity, of course. So that stuff I like. The family dynamics with Gruberson and the Spanglers, I like that too. Paul Rudd, who was really good in Afterlife, he's really good in this movie. I like the idea of him more or less being of him taking the stepfather role to Phoebe and her brother Trevor. I like it. It's done really, really well. And Paul Rudd has a lot of fun moments in this movie. Has a lot of good moments in this movie. Paul Rudd's always entertaining in general. Carrie Coon as the mom, she was fine too. The actress who played Phoebe, I like her. She's also pretty cool. I like the whole idea of her befriending a ghost who we find out is more or less being controlled by Graca, who is pretty much using her emotions in order to get what he wants. That stuff is okay. It's telegraphed. You can see it coming from a mile away, because there's always a reason why this random ghost has more or less is showing herself to Phoebe as opposed to anyone else. Kind of playing on Phoebe still being an outsider and still being too smart for her own good. But I think the character of Phoebe never comes across as annoying. She comes across as somebody who, she is too smart for her own good. She's reckless in a way. Her family calls her out on it, but it just doesn't process in her mind, in her mind. And when it eventually does, she grows more as a character. The family dynamics, to me, are the best parts of this movie, and the expansion of that family, and them learning to be a family and be a unit. And I like the whole idea of the Ghostbusters team being a team of a mother, her children, and their stepfather. I thought that was actually, I like it. I like it. It's really well handled, really well done, and all the actors do a good job. In terms of Finn Wolfhard, who was more or less the main character in the last movie, he doesn't really get to do much in this movie. He has a couple of fun scenes here and there, but this is more Phoebe's movie than it is her movie. I mean, you can also make the case that Afterlife was also Phoebe's movie, but at least Finn Wolfhard had something to do in Afterlife. And this one, he kind of just feels there for the sake of being there and doesn't really do much. I mean, he has one funny scene where he's trying to go after Slimer and Slimer attacks him. So, take that for what it is. The scenes with Ray, Phoebe, and Podcast, I think this stuff's very entertaining. We take a trip back to the library, in which we see the original librarian from that first movie have a nice little cameo. and we also get the introduction of Patton Oswalt's character, who is more or less who is someone who believes in the occult and stuff like that, and has a vast knowledge of the Graca character. I thought his inclusion was actually pretty fun. It's like another Ray, so no complaints with that. And I like Patton Oswalt is good for what he brings to the table, just in general. Like, he's not bad. But yeah, that stuff was really well handled. So much fun to see the return of William Atherton as Walter Peck, who is now the mayor of New York. And just like Walter was in that first movie, he still does not like the Ghostbusters and does whatever he can to try and stop the Ghostbusters. So fun to see Walter Peck come back in the Ghostbusters franchise. He was. I think one of the things that Ghostbusters 2 should have done was continue the character of Peck, but bringing him back, even if it's for fan service. As a fan, William Atherton is really good as the character of Peck. He has that just uptight assholery, and you want to see him get his comeuppance. So I like it. But I also like how he's antagonistic still to the Ghostbusters. But now it's even worse because now they got children who are doing something dangerous. And of course that doesn't sit with him, So I like that stuff. It's well done. It's good. It's funny. In terms of this movie's visuals, I think Gil Keenan's directing is really spot on. His directing is no different than Ivan Reitman and then Jason Reitman in Afterlife. You have that same continuity in terms of the visual style. The cinematography is well done by Eric Steele. It's a decent looking movie. Again, it keeps that same aesthetic as Afterlife. I thought the visual effects, the special effects were well done. A nice use of practical and digital, in which the CG is used to enhance the practical effects, and it looks good for the most part. So I got no complaints with that. Even though I think Graca is a very just villain of the week, I do like the whole idea of an ancient being that can literally freeze the entire world. I think that's pretty cool. I also like how this movie has a flashback to a 1904, like seeing early 1900s New York, which was the first in which we see Graca for the first time, where he freezes to death a bunch of people. I like seeing that aesthetic, and I think it would be interesting to see a Ghostbusters movie, or at least like a short that's set in the early 1900s of New York in 1900s. I think that could be an interesting thing to explore, just from a fascination standpoint. What else is there? What else do I have to say about Frozen Empire? I mean, the utilization of most of the OG cast is great. Seeing Janine come back was a lot of fun. Seeing her in costume is also pretty cool. It takes a lot of inspiration from the old Ghostbusters animated series, where Janine, gets to wear a proton pack and fight ghosts. That was pretty cool. So yeah, Bill Murray as Venkman. It's just fun to see Bill Murray in general, even though his role is limited compared to Ernie Hudson and Ray, who are more or less prominent in this movie. Just seeing Bill Murray come back is fun, and he has some decent scenes. Ray having more of a mentor role is a lot of fun, and I like that a lot. And Ernie more or less being the public figurehead of the Ghostbusters and their financial backer. Hey, that's cool too. I still wish that we can get Dana Barrett. I still wish we can get her son Oscar come back. And I just hope that if we do get another movie set, if we do get a sequel to this, let's try and find a way to bring back Tully. I miss Rick Moranis. I want to see him just make one appearance in these new movies. Just one little appearance. It doesn't have to be a main character. Just give me a scene of Tully interacting with Janine as a callback to their budding romance in Ghostbusters 2. Give me something. And the third act of the movie, it is what it is. It's fine. It's good. It's decent. It wraps the whole story up. Again, not every single character in this movie is memorable or need to be in here. For example, like I said, the character of Trevor by Finn Wolfhard, he doesn't really do much. They bring back the character of Lucky, played by Celeste O'Connor. She is completely and totally pointless. She doesn't really bring anything to this movie like she did in Afterlife for the most part. And this one, it feels like the character of Lucky is just there. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this movie has a much more larger ensemble cast. And you kind of get that feeling that there's a lot of instances where they don't know what to do with the cast, with the cast. Like they're trying to give everyone their own little story, and then excuse me, then you have characters who are just put by the wayside. For example, you have Lucky, who was kind of who was like just there, and you have this character of Lars who works as one of Zedmore's scientists. He has a handful of appearances sprinkled throughout, but he doesn't really do much. He's kind of taken out before when the third act starts, and he doesn't even do anything to stop Crack or help the team. Like he does. I mean, he has one scene where he and Lucky are trying to open the orb. It's actually a pretty decently done scene that kind of gives you a creepy feel to it. But that's basically all I can remember him doing. This movie going for a more serious tone. I mean, the Ghostbusters should never go for an overly serious tone. It should always have that lightheartedness to it. Like Afterlife having a more serious tone, that makes more sense because you're dealing with the death of Egon. So that movie having a more earnest tone is understandable. But Frozen Empire should pretty much go back to the tone of the first two movies, in which it has elements of seriousness, but you still have that over the top fun to it that just screams just good time. And you do get moments of that with Frozen Empire. So yeah, for all that being said, I'm going to give Ghostbusters Frozen Empire a solid 6.5 out of 10. I overall did like it. It is enjoyable, and it's a nice addition to the Ghostbusters franchise. And if they do make one more, let's have this last movie actually be the end of the Ghostbusters franchise. But yeah, those are my thoughts on Frozen Empire. Let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.